Hello and welcome to the 3D printing industry news.
We are here in beautiful Santa Clara with Inside 3D Printing Expo.
Yes, we are. We're here with the cream of the crop of the 3D printing industry. Let's go inside and have a look and see what some of these guys have to say.
Okay.
Welcome to 3D Printing Industry News.
Brought to you by 3D Systems.
And one of the pioneers in synthetic biology since 2010, Lynn Rothschild, gave us a great interview. She's the evolutionary biologist and astrobiologist from NASA's Ames Research Center.
Hello, we are here with Lynn Rothschild, and she's the lead scientist for synthetic biology at NASA. Very exciting person who just made a keynote speech here in Santa Clara Inside 3D Printing Show. Welcome to the show, and we wanted to discuss a little bit about your work today. So things that you are keeping you busy, and some of the things that you're working on is just astonishing in terms of it goes into outer space and everything else. So can you tell a little bit about the kind of topics you're working on at the moment?
Excellent. Well, part of the idea is using synthetic biology as a way to enable space missions, as well as some of other NASA missions on the Earth, which I'll get to in a few moments. Now, when we go into space, we have a problem that people on the ground don't have, and that is that we have to launch things through Earth's gravity well, and that becomes extremely expensive. And so it's critically important for us to keep down the mass, the up mass as we call it. So the smaller we can make things, the better it is. So can you imagine if you went to some place like Mars, instead of bringing a habitat with you, which would be very heavy, you would have had to lift it up, and that's expensive, and it would have also then taken away from other things you could launch, that you go to some place like Mars and you use the material around you to make something. The thing is that you can't just put things together. You're going to need to have glues and food and fuel and all sorts of things produced. And that's where biology comes in. So if you can start to think of biology as an enabling technology, you've gained an enormous amount. So imagine that you could just take a tiny vial of cells with you to some place like Mars. You have them grow up using the water there, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and so on. And then they can be used to do things like make feedstock for 3D printing or food or fuel or pharmaceuticals or whatever.
Okay.
And so these are some of the problems that we're trying to tackle.
Okay, that's very exciting. And what about the applications that are a little bit closer to us rather than in Mars? Is there something that you can think in the short term will also impact?
Absolutely. If we focus primarily on this mass issue, it's going to lead us to technologies that will then become much more portable for use on the Earth. So, for example, if you have a 300-pound piece of equipment in your lab, it's not going to be something that's highly mobile. And you might want to use that kind of technology, for example, in the field in a rural area.
Sure.
But if we can help drive the technology so that it becomes miniaturized, because we needed to take it to space, it will therefore also be miniaturized so that you can use it in remote areas where you would not be able to use large pieces of equipment.
Okay. That's exciting. So in terms of the private sector here represented in an organization or event like this, so do you find some interesting applications here
absolutely.
that is helping your work or kind of giving ideas?
Well, absolutely. Now, for example, we have projects going on, for example, making advanced biocomposites using material that we would find on the surface of Mars, sort of the equivalent of dirt here, although technically dirt doesn't have the same composition. So here, when you build concrete, you've got to add all sorts of things to it that have that are not necessarily available elsewhere. But in your body, for example, there are cells that produce glues that hold bits and pieces of you together. So why not make, say, a yeast cell, something fairly simple in the grand scheme of things, able to make this biological glue? You then mix it with sand or broken glass or the surface of Mars and use that as a feedstock for 3D printing. And then you could make yourself a table or a chair or a brick that you can then build a habitat with. So the applications on Mars then become very interesting on the Earth as well. You can certainly make biologically produced plastics that could be used as feedstock for additive manufacturing. And then The last part is that there are all sorts of biological capabilities on the Earth that we use every day. My guess is that you have cotton in your shirt, I have wool and silk in my sweater, and so on. Now, I'm not suggesting that we take cotton plants or silk or cows or sheep to Mars. But there's no reason that we can't take those capabilities, engineer them into cells, for example, again, like a yeast cell, have them produce the wood or the silk or the leather or whatever, and make something with it. Now, we could use this in sheets. We could, again, use this as feedstock in 3D printing. There are all sorts of applications that could then be applied to Earth-based problems.
Okay. That sounds very exciting. And finally, what kind of timeframes are we looking at the moment with relation to Mars and missions and everything else? So what kind of timescales?
I thought you were going to ask me about the technology. And the technology is moving at a scary fast rate.
Okay.
Particularly, we've got a lot of very young students involved who don't know the meaning of the word no, and if you tell them no, it only makes them work harder. So a lot of this is moving very quickly. In terms of the Mars mission time schedule, what you really want to do is send a mission when the Earth and Mars are going to be closest. So it's like throwing a ball to a catcher. You know, you have to worry about both of them running and having the minimum distance for the catching. It turns out that that means for Earth and Mars, it's about once every 2 years. So we are at the point, we being NASA, the European Space Agency, and some of these other space agencies around the world, the Indians and so on, are launching about every 2 years to Mars. With the current technology, it takes about 6 months to get there. Then you need to be there about a year and a half before the planets realign. So we're working on moving this forward in terms of actually bringing some of this technology that I'm discussing with you to Mars. We do not have a mission on the books right now. However, we do have a satellite mission coming up with DLR, the German space agency that my work was privileged to be selected for. And so that'll be coming up with a launch in 2017. And what's exciting is this satellite will spin so that we'll have periods of time at microgravity, lunar gravity, and Martian gravity. And we'll be testing not the 3D printing component, but the synthetic biology component. So making sure that the cells are still producing the sort of things that we've engineered them to do on the Earth. And so that will be critically important as they then go forward as in producing feedstock for additive manufacturing, or they themselves become part of this process.
Okay. Fascinating, interesting concept altogether. So we'll keep focusing very closely on forthcoming missions and your work, how it evolves.
Well, our job is to keep pushing the edge.
Excellent. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching 3D Printing Industry News TV, brought to you by 3D Systems.